G'day everyone, Viv here, hope you're all keeping well. Welcome back to our series on learning how to play SAGA. This is episode 3. In episode 1, we spoke about recruiting and deploying a force. In episode 2, we spoke about the orders phase where I allocate SAGA dice out to various abilities that I plan to use during that turn. This is episode 3 where we speak about activations. There are 3 types of activations or 3 types of actions I can take during a unit's activation. I can activate and move them, I can activate and shoot with them, and I can activate and rest them. So let's jump into the details and learn about these different types of actions. So I've got my force deployed here on the table, facing off against my opposition, and I have already gone through my orders phase, which we went through in episode 2. Now I want to start activating each of my units in turn. Like we learned during the orders phase, I need to make sure that I've got dice allocated to the activation abilities on my battle board. So I'm going to start off by saying this unit of Hearthguard at the back I'm going to activate by sacrificing the dice off of my battle board, and I'm going to move them forward 6 inches, which is medium distance. So I'm just going to go ahead and shuffle my Hearthguard forward. Movement for guys on foot is 6 inches, medium distance. When you're mounted, it's 12 inches or long. It's pretty much straightforward. Terrain does have some influence on movement, so let's activate this unit of warriors and move them through this forest over here. So to do that, I need to activate by spending a dice off my battle board, activating that unit, and then moving them through the forest. Uneven ground, which could be forests or fields or marshes or swamps or something like that, reduces the movement of the unit from medium to short when they are either approaching into, through or out of uneven ground. Now the unit is in open ground at the moment, but it wants to move through some uneven ground, so it needs to be a bit cautious, and therefore moving it is reduced to 4 inches. So we can sort of just get inside the forest here, and we'll shuffle some of these guys up about 4 inches. That's it, our movement activation. I can also engage in melee as part of a move activation, as long as my 6-inch movement takes me into base-to-base contact. So that's the movement, fairly straightforward, fairly easy. 6 inches for regular guys, 12 inches for people mounted on horses. Uneven ground reduces my movement from medium down to short. Let's talk now about that movement that ends in melee. So I've changed things around here, just swapped the positions of the warlords, the Hearthguard and the warriors. I'm going to activate this unit of warriors and engage these Hearthguard in melee. So I need to make sure that I've got an activation dice on the warriors activation box. I'm going to sacrifice that dice to activate them. I'm going to move them forward 6 inches, which brings me into base-to-base contact. So first off, I start by moving into base-to-base contact. Then I shuffle everybody else up 6 inches to bring them into, or as close to, the enemy as possible. Now that I've got everyone involved in the combat, or as close to the combat as possible, now begins my melee phase. So there's a sequence of steps that we need to follow to work this melee out. The first one is the attacker generating his attack dice. At this point, it's probably good to know how many attack dice each type of unit generates. Hearthguard generate 2 attack dice in melee, warriors 1, and levies, barring any special rules, generate 1 attack dice for every 3 models involved in the combat. So I've got 8 warriors fighting these Hearthguard, so I get 8 dice. Now, models engaged in combat are considered to be engaged if they're in base-to-base contact or within 2 inches of an enemy model who is in base-to-base contact with one of my models. So in this case, all of my models are engaged. So I have 8 dice. Now the opponent determines how many attack dice he has. So I'm fighting Hearthguard, they get 2 dice each, and my opponent has 4 of them. So he's also getting 8 dice. 2, 4, 6, 8. Once we know how many attack dice we both have, the defender now chooses whether he's going to play defensively. If he's going to choose to play defensively, he sacrifices half of his attack dice and then discards half of those dice and keeps those as defense dice, which we'll use later on, and he's therefore left with 4 attack dice. Before we move forward and talk about the rest of the steps, it's probably a good idea to know now what different stats all of the models have. Now it is a little bit complicated because there is only one stat in SAGA, armor rating. That's it. There's only one stat. Hearthguard and Warlords have an armor value of 5, Warriors 4, Levies 3. That is what I need to roll or beat to kill one of those models in combat. So I'm fighting Hearthguard who have an armor rating of 5. I need 5s or 6s to kill them. The Hearthguard are fighting me back. I'm Warriors. I have an armor rating of 4. Therefore he needs 4s, 5s or 6s. It's that simple. One stat in SAGA, it makes it nice and easy. So, first step, attacker generates his attack dice. Second step, defender generates his attack dice. Third step, defender chooses whether he's going to play defensively and therefore sacrifice half of his dice, and then discard half of those and move the remaining into defense. Fourth step is to determine whether we're going to use any battle board abilities. Now on my battle board, I don't have any dice allocated to special abilities, and neither does my opponent. Let's just assume that he doesn't. So neither of us are going to use any special abilities. That might give us more dice to roll, or give us more defensive dice, or reduce or increase armor values, etc. Special rule sort of stuff. Next step, step 5. Are we going to use any fatigue? Is there any fatigue involved in this combat? No fatigue at this point. Units that have fatigue are marked with a token. In this case, nobody has any fatigue, so fatigue's going to play no part in this combat. It's a straight up fight. Okay, so now that we've gone through those sequences, those 5 steps, attackers dice, defenders attack dice, defenders defense dice, battle board abilities, and fatigue, it's time to roll some dice. Before we do that, I've decided to throw one more thing into the mix here. The Hearthguard that I'm fighting are not regular Hearthguard. They are armed with Dane axes. Dane axes are big 2-handed weapons, and they have some special rules. First, they reduce the bearer's armor by 1 point, so from 5 down to 4, because they don't have a very much defense. They're not carrying a shield or anything like that, so their armor is reduced by 1 point. My armor is also reduced by 1 point because it's such a bloody big weapon, it's going to cause so much carnage that my armor is reduced by 1 point. So as it stands, I'm now hitting the Hearthguard on 4s. The Hearthguard are hitting my Warriors on 3 because of the modified armor values. Now it's time to roll some dice. So I'm going to go ahead and roll up my dice first. I need 4s. Brilliant. I've got 4 of them. 4 5s nonetheless. And we'll discard the others. The Hearthguard are going to attack back with their attack dice, and they need 3s. And they've rolled 3. So immediately, I now get to be defensive. I've taken 3 wounds. So now I can try and cancel those wounds on rolls of 5 or 6. And I've rolled a 4, a 4 and a 2. None. So 3 of my guys die. Now the Warriors did 4 points of damage to the Hearthguard. The Hearthguard already have 2 dice in defense. So they roll 1 for every wound they've taken, plus their additional defense dice from their sacrifice earlier on. They cancel on 5s or 6s also. Everybody cancels on 5s or 6s in melee. So we'll roll up. And we've cancelled 1 wound. So the Hearthguard also take 3 wounds. Let's get rid of these dice. So in this case, there is no clear winner. I lost 3 models, the opponent lost 3 models. Nobody wins. Now if the attacker initiates a round of melee and does not win, they must withdraw. So let's get rid of these dead guys. Now, to withdraw from combat, I need to move up to 4 inches away and at least 2 inches away. So I'm going to move directly back 4 inches to about here, and making sure that I've moved at least very short and that I'm very short away from any enemy models. These 3 Hearthguard are dead, and the round of melee is over. At the end of the round of melee, both of these units earn fatigue. We'll talk further about fatigue later on, but that's the activation for movement and the activation for movement that ends in melee. So let's talk about the shooting activation. So far we've spoken about activating a unit and moving it. We've spoken about activating a unit and moving it, which results in melee. Now we can activate a unit and shoot with it. So here on the table I've got a little scenario set up where my US Marines are standing in for some Dark Ages figures, simply because I don't have any Dark Ages figures with ranged weapons that are painted, and I didn't want to use unpainted figures. So the Marines standing back here are representing a unit of levies with bows. Now it's useful to point out that in most armies only your levies can be equipped with ranged weapons, although some armies are slightly different and there are some special rules. So let's have a look at this scenario here. I need to make sure that I've got a dice allocated on my battle board first to be able to activate the unit that I want to shoot with. In this case I do. I'm going to sacrifice that dice from my levies activation ability. I'm going to activate this unit of levies and I'm going to shoot at this unit of warriors. Now shooting is fairly straightforward. It's very similar to melee. At least one of the models in the unit that is shooting must be able to see at least one of the models in the unit that I want to shoot at. But only those models who have line of sight and are within range can actually shoot. Now bows have a range of 12 inches. Javelins, which also are ranged weapons, have a range of 6. But in this case, our levies are armed with bows. So they are within 12 inches. However, these two guys that are behind the building can't draw line of sight. So they can't shoot and therefore do not contribute dice towards the shooting. Now again, like melee, different types of troops contribute different numbers of dice towards the fighting, in this case shooting. Shooting, warriors and levies generate 1 dice for every 2 models that are shooting. Hearthguard generate 1 dice and your warlord generates 2 dice. So in this example here on the table, where I've got 6 levies shooting at this unit of 5 warriors, 2 of them can't participate, so I've only got 4 remaining. I therefore only get 2 dice, 1 for every 2 levies that is shooting. Once I determine the number of attack dice that I'm going to use, I then check my battle board to see if there are any shooting abilities that I'm allowed to use. Now every ability has a byline. It's either going to be melee or shooting reaction, or orders reaction, some type of ability used during a specific phase of the game. Now in this case I don't have any special abilities that I'm going to use. The defender chooses whether he's going to use any special abilities from his board to increase his armor or prevent a number of your guys from shooting, or whatever the army's abilities might be. In this example we've generated attack dice. We are not using any special abilities. Our defender is not using any special abilities. Now I go ahead and make my attack roll. It's the same as melee. I need to know what the unit's armor value is and roll equal to or higher than it. In this case the unit is a unit of warriors. I therefore need 4s, 5s or 6s. Look at this, I've rolled 2 4s. At this stage the defender now gets a chance to defend himself, just like we did in melee. In melee, you can defend against hits by rolling a 5 or 6. In shooting, you can defend against hits by rolling 4 5s or 6s. So we'll roll up, and we rolled a 1, and we rolled a 6. So one of the hits has gone through, and one of these guys dies. That's the shooting sequence. It's fairly straightforward. SAGA abilities can complicate things a little bit, but we're not worrying about those at the moment. It's that simple. Determine from the shooting unit which models can see and are in range of the unit it wants to shoot at. Total up the number of models involved in the combat. Determine the attacker's dice. Determine whether you're going to use any special abilities from your battle board. So does your opponent, so does the defender. Roll the attack dice. Determine the number of hits. The defender then rolls his defense dice to see if he can cancel any hits. And any hits that he doesn't cancel, kill one of the people in the unit. And this unit lost one of them. That's the shooting sequence. It's fairly straightforward. Once the shooting is finished, or actually partway through the shooting phase, the shooting unit does generate a point of fatigue. The defenders do not. Unlike melee, where both of the units generated a point of fatigue, In this case, only the shooting unit generates fatigue. So now we've learned how to move, how to fight in melee, how to shoot. Let's talk about the last action that I can take as part of an activation. That's the rest. So I can activate a unit and rest it. Again, I need to make sure that I've got dice allocated out here on my battle board to be able to activate various units. So this unit of warriors in the middle that have a point of activation fought against this unit of Hearthguard that have a point of fatigue in the previous turn. It's my turn now and I decide to activate this unit of warriors, so I sacrifice a dice. I declare that this unit is going to rest and it does nothing but loses a point of fatigue. That's it. That's the rest activation. All it's used for is removing fatigue from your units. It's the only way that you can use fatigue. Later on down the track, we'll talk about how to use fatigue in combat, the influences that it has. But for the moment, it's enough to know that the rest action simply is the removal of 1 point of fatigue. I activate the unit, I rest it, and remove a point of fatigue. There's nothing to prevent me if this unit had 3 points of fatigue and I had several dice allocated to warrior units on my battle board. I might activate this unit once and rest it, activate it and rest it. I might then also activate a unit of warriors, choose this one and rest it. I might then activate a unit of warriors and choose this one and rest it. All in the same turn. I don't have any more dice left to activate other warrior units, but I am allowed to activate units multiple number of times in the same turn. And in this case, I've activated them to remove fatigue from that unit. So that's the end of episode 3, talking about activations. It's fairly straightforward. There's 3 types of actions that I can take. Activate and move, and then subsequently fight in melee if I can get into close combat. Activate and shoot, or activate and rest to get rid of fatigue. They're my 3 choices, so I simply go through my battle board, sacrificing activation dice to activate various units. Once I've got no more units that I can activate, my turn is complete and it gets handed over to my opponent. He then rolls up his orders and then goes through his activations, and then once he can't activate anything else, it comes back to me and we keep on going forward like this. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope it's been useful. In the next video, we'll talk further about fatigue, accumulating fatigue, spending fatigue, and as you learn how to get rid of it is by activating and resting the unit, but we'll save that for the next video. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you soon. See ya.